So this is the April market report, and really finishing up the first quarter of 2016. We look back for Southeast Michigan, and actually building from January, February through March and beginning of April, activity continues to build, and we've been surprised by that. But a lot of it, we think, as we said in prior months, has to do with the warm weather and some of that borrowing some spring business that we saw last year. Because last year, 2015 and 2014, winters were harsh, so we sort of got an explosion of business in spring. But we're surprised so far in March the business was strong. We're watching April very closely, so it just may be that there's still a little bit of that pent-up demand out there, so we could see business. If we're wrong, it's probably being too conservative. The market may be a little bit stronger than what we're seeing. In fact, if you look at the market for Southeast Michigan, from 0 to 150,000, if we break out into price segments, that market is extremely strong. Inventories continue to decline. Values jumped almost 9% quarter-to-quarter comparison, so it's a lot of activity, and that's where most of the activity is going and probably where the biggest shortage of inventory is. Inventory is actually continuing to shrink in that price range. In the 150 to 250 range, inventories are also shrinking, but not as much, a few percentage points versus over 10% in the 0 to 150. And values are up, but up maybe about 3% or so not quite as much. You move to the higher price points in the 250 to 500 range, that middle range. Inventories rather are rising, so are values as well. They're sort of moving together, but increases of maybe 2 or 3%, so a little bit smaller and a little bit more reasonable. You go over $500,000, inventories are rising rather dramatically. And values for Southeast Michigan are probably flat to even down a little bit in that price range. And it's not because there's necessarily a bubble in the upper end market. It just is the upper end market is settling. As we said before, it was the first to recover, maybe the first to settle to normal. There may be some instability in terms of stock market moving up and down. It may have caused some people with larger stock market portfolios to be a little more hesitant as to how they move in the upper end. But we're watching that segment closely to see if it might be a bellwether for anything else going on. But the reality is that values are still moving towards the peak values of 2006 and 2005. If you look at Case-Shiller and their numbers, they show that we're about 85% back to peak. And the Case-Shiller appreciation numbers are probably the best to use. The challenge is they lag behind a little bit. So if you look at a Case-Shiller report, it'll show that Southeast Michigan is, they use in terms of years, we're about 2000, 2001 values. We're actually probably closer to almost 2002 values, which does bring us close to that 85% return. In different parts of the metro area, that's different. For the city of Detroit, it's probably not that high. For some areas like Royal Oak, Berkeley, even Birmingham, Troy, we're probably in parts of Novi, we're probably even closer to 100%. Certainly in Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor City itself, we're that or even above. So it varies from area to area, but on average, 85% is probably a good number. In general, we're seeing the same trends we've been seeing last year carrying to this year, where inventories are starting to rise in the above 250 and still being constricted in the under 250 markets, and that's across all market areas. We're still expecting, though, to see a little bit of an inventory bump throughout the year. But what's been very pleasing to us is that buyer demand is very strong. So even in the upper end, where values are flattening out and inventories are rising, we're still selling more homes over $500,000 this year than last in Southeast Michigan. So it still gives us some underlying strength for buyer demand. So we'll see how that continues into spring. And if that continues and if we still have a little bit of a pent-up activity from our recession still carrying forward, we'll see how that works. But either way, economic conditions are pretty stable right now, so we think we're still going to carry forward to a pretty strong spring. So that's it. Thanks.